All right, this is ninth lit, and we just got started. So, what I'm saying is, we have what we're going to do today is I give you a background of this book, and I'm going to give you an assignment that'll be due the day after the remote day, which is the 2nd. So we come back next Monday, the 30th. On Wednesday is the remote day, and then Thursday, the new vocabulary will be due. So we'll treat this just like we've treated all the other books we've read. The only difference is we may not be testing before the exam. This is just a weird thing we're doing this year. So we'll get to that in just a minute. I have all that to give you. What can we pray about? This is Thanksgiving week, and I wrote up here, it just came to mind. It doesn't have the word thankful in it. It's in the passage, but Psalm 100. Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come into his presence with singing. You probably know it. I should know it, and I probably do. Know that the Lord, he is God. It is he who made us. We are his. We are his people, the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him, bless his name, for the Lord is good. His steadfast love endures forever, and his faithfulness to all generations. It's really a Thanksgiving psalm. And we pointed out that, Thanksgiving, the whole idea of thanking should be a joyful thing, right? I mean, you have things that you're thankful for. I mean, you're not thankful in a sad way. Thanksgiving is by nature happy, because you're just acknowledging and thanking for the fact that you have things or are things or whatever that may be. So I guess it would be appropriate today to ask you what you're thankful for. I can start because I have something thankful. Friday night, I recommend this. If you haven't been out there, the Natural Science Center has this light show. Anybody seen it? It's really, the little kids will enjoy it. And people my age will enjoy it too because they're with the little kids. But it's really neat. They do a good job. We were there literally 2 hours. So you walk it. It's where the ropes course is, behind the center, and it's also inside. Even they use the planetarium and several rooms. And then you go to the carousel. You can ride the carousel for the price of the ticket. Of course, it's at night because it's a light show. But we were there from like 9 to 11. I think we were the last people there. The reason we were the last people there is because on the way there, we were riding in 2 cars, and we were at the intersection of Battleground and Edney Ridge, where the coffee place, Starbucks, Pisgah Church is up there, CVS, Lowe's, that corner. And of course it's 8:30 maybe, and not a lot of traffic, but we went through the intersection out of Edney Ridge, turned left, and our other son, who had 2 kids in his own son, and one of my other grandsons sitting in it, and as we were driving away, you heard this, and Will, my son, he says, Al just got hit. And he did this U-turn. He says, Elijah, his son, was sitting in the seat where the car hit. So he did a U-turn, came back around, and jumped out of the car and ran up there. And sure enough, Elijah, who's 7, he was sitting, here, and the door had been pushed in about here. I don't know how fast the lady was going. She ran a red light. But he's waiting for traffic to come out of the CVS parking lot to turn left. She just goes right here, at the very spot where Elijah was sitting. And the EMT came and they checked him out, and he cried a little bit, not even that much. We went over to the Science Center, and he forgot it. And I'm sure somewhere in his psyche, he'll never forget that experience. But you know how kids are. They get over things pretty quick when they're distracted. So he hasn't shown one symptom of any kind of anything. He says he didn't feel bad, So he was sitting right there. I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that God protected him. it, you know, it just, and His mercy, so that would, I'll start there. Anybody else have anything you wanna be thankful for? Yeah, Tim?
That like nobody's gotten like sick yet and we still get to go to school.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, say, church, you know, yeah, we're still in business, been there since August 20th. As far as I know, we haven't had a confirmed case, at least not any confirmed enough to shut us down. So we've been here since August the 20th, we've been here since August the 10th, every day. Yeah. And
I'm thinking whether we can have like a sports season while like public schools can.
yeah. Although I think some of their fall sports,
Yeah.
like cross-country is starting, but football's not starting until March. Maybe they are. You're right. Our volleyball girls, yeah, I'm sure there were girls all over the city jealous of them being able to play a season and win a championship. We were the only show in town, basically. Anything else you want to be thankful for? I bet some of you are traveling. We'll pray for safe travels. All right, well, let me pray for it. Father, thank you for these students. Thank you that we're here. Like Tim said, we're still here. After 3 months, at least, since August, we're still here. And we give you the credit, because a lot of people would wear masks, social distance. Oh, we're doing only what everybody else would be doing, except they haven't had the chance to do that. And we do give you the credit for protecting us. And we just ask for it because we know any day it could end. You know, we could do something we could have an outbreak. So we're grateful though that we're still here, and we're grateful as a result that we've had, of course, school, but we've also had sports, and you know, every fall sport participated, did really well, and now, you know, basketball has already played three games, and again, I don't think there's a high school basketball team in the city, besides maybe Inver Day and us, that have played. So we're in the winter sports already, and we're thankful for that. I'm thankful for Elijah's safety, for protecting. I think I said that. Pray for safety on the road as we travel, as they do. I think some of them will be. I just pray that you protect everybody from the virus, and we're just thankful for the day that we're here. I pray that we make the best use of it. And Father, Thanksgiving is not natural. It's something we have to learn to do. It ought to be, but as sinners, we're not by nature grateful. And you require us to be grateful, and because you know it's good for us. And so we pray to exercise true Thanksgiving this week and every day. In fact, we're commanded to be grateful people every day. So we just ask your blessing on this, and we're grateful in Jesus' name. Amen. I wanted to read one other verse. It's 1 Thessalonians. 1 Thessalonians. 5:16. Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstance, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. So you see where it's a command. This is the will of God, to be rejoicing, praying, and thanking in all circumstance. Sometimes it's easy when Elijah, was safe. Sometimes it's hard. When we talked last week about Clee Childs, he wasn't physically safe. He's certainly safe eternally. But we're asked to give thanks in every circumstance. So thank you. All right, so let me go back to exam just a minute. I'm going to give you an exam review when we come back. I'll work on. I have one from last year. I want to tweak it. It's going to be very streamlined. You have an exam review for Beowulf, like 2 pages. You have exam review for Sorrow, about 3 pages. I don't need to give you all that. You already have that. Plus, you'll have the tests that you can take home with you and study. So what I'm going to do, and Dr. Talbot, I just mentioned to him, he'll probably do something like this. I'm going to give you a list of about 15 things to study. Not details, but big things like I can imagine something like the treasure giving in the Middle Ages, the supernatural, the way books treat both books we read, and maybe three, because we may get through this one. How does it treat God? How is God treated? You see where I'm going with this? How about courage? How about revenge? These are big topics that you're going to have to go back and study. And all exams are cumulative. They're not new material. So you get all the things you've studied for a semester will be on the exam. So that's a good part. You know this stuff. It's not like learning for the first time. When we come back, you'll get that sheet, and at least next week, you'll work on it on your own at home. We won't spend class time. Then the next week, we'll start to spend some class time, and we'll talk more about the oral exam, where you're going to have to get up and talk for 2 minutes. We may practice those things. And then, of course, the third week, you'll be taking the exam later in the week. I don't have the exam schedule in front of me. I'll have it up there when you get back. But later in the week before Christmas, we'll have the exam. And the day of the oral exam, typically, you just have your oral exam. That's all you have all day. So you'll probably come here at 10:30. First one starts at 8:30. Second one, which would be B, starts at 10:30, and we'll be out of here by probably noon. And then C period will come in at 12:30, or maybe 12:45. And you'll do the oral, and then the next day you'll come in and you'll have a 2.5 hour period to take 2 exams, Dr. Talbert's and mine. Mine will be about 1 hour and 15 minutes. His will be 1 hour and 15 minutes. There'll be big questions like revenge and heroism and epic characteristics of epic literature and those kinds of things, treasure giving, treatment of God. There'll be big questions, and you'll be writing, say, short answers, but then maybe a bigger answer, like an essay. You have about 1 hour and 15 minutes to do his, and then 1 hour and 15 minutes to do mine, and I don't know how the exam will be given. Sometimes I don't know how they do it. And they give both at the same time, or you finish one, you raise your hand, they'll give you the other. So that, and bam, we're at Christmas. So that's what that looks like, and we'll start that on Monday. If we don't get finished with Murder in Cathedral, we will finish it when we come back. So we'll have those 2 weeks after Christmas, and you need another test. Now, by the way, I will be working on your papers, your test, and I may have mentioned this too, but I'm going to try to finish them tomorrow. I don't know if I can. You won't see me anyway. Just check, if you want to check over the holiday, check it. I'd like to finish it even at home, if I take it home, and then post it. So by the end of the week, you'll know what you made on that test, and then we start focusing on the next one. Do you have any questions about that schedule? I don't blame, in a way, I don't blame you if you didn't listen to a word I said, because sometimes it's hard. He's talking about 4 weeks from now. I'm just trying to get through the day. But at least I did my duty. I told you, and it's coming. So you will hear more about this. So you have in front of you a book. I'm going to give you 2 more things that go with it. I'm going to give you a study guide. It's only 1 page, front and back. Look at the book. It's got 78 pages in it, something like that. And it's a play, which means that it's dialogue. Very little background that you have to read. So here's the review. Here's the study guide. So let me go ahead and make one assignment. I'm going to ask you to do the first 15 words, malversation through stratagem, for Thursday, December 3rd. They have over a week. You can do it when you come back, you know. Remember, the 2nd of December, you won't be here, because it's the remote day. I am not live that day, so you won't be doing a Zoom with me, but 2 or 3 of your other classes, maybe 3 or 4, they just arbitrarily selected. They don't want everybody to do it, because the system wouldn't handle it. So we're gonna be here, teachers will be here, Zooming with you, or having posted a video to watch, or something to, you know, to do. My work will probably have something to do with Murder and Cathedral. That makes sense, right? So you'll be doing something that Wednesday for me during that class period. The class periods are A, B, C. That's not the normal Wednesday schedule. So that Wednesday will be the same as Monday. So you'll have my class at 9:15. Although you're not gonna be Zooming with me, that's when you can focus on what I've asked you to do that day. And then at 10:10, I guess there'll be a break, just like normal, and you can take a break at home, and then at 10:30, you'll start your C period, have a lunch period. It's just a regular school class schedule, but you'll be doing it from home, yeah.
When do we get back from Mexico?
A week from today, the 30th. So it's gonna be really interesting the next 3 weeks, the next 4 weeks, including today, just seeing you one time is interesting. So, again, please do the first 15 words, sentences and definitions. You know how I usually do a PowerPoint with you?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not gonna do that because I couldn't access it, so instead of doing the PowerPoint, I am going to, I'm gonna give you the PowerPoint. So I made a copy of it, and so I'm giving you the notes. All we have to do is go over it. How'd JV and varsity do?
Right.
Varsity.
Yeah, we don't have 40.
No, you didn't.
Both won?
Yeah, we both won by like 40.
About over 40?
By like 40. We won by like 30 something.
That's right, JV did. And varsity did good?
Yeah.
Who did you play? Oh, the university.
Christian. That's where
I was.
Matthew used to go to school there.
Yeah, I used to go to school there.
All right. Well
Nathan,
done.
stop lying.
All right, so what we're gonna do is treat this like we usually do the PowerPoint and go over it. So all you need is a highlighter or something that you can truly highlight. All right, it's called Murder in the Cathedral. It sounds like a murder mystery. It is not a mystery. It is a murder. It's based on a real event that took place in 1170 AD, so during the Middle Ages. The book, however, was written, I believe, in 1935. So it's written in the 20th century about a story that takes place in the 12th century. That's why we read it. The writer of the book is T.S. Eliot. You ever heard of him?
Yeah. Yes.
How did you heard of him?
I don't know, it just sounds like a really familiar name.
Yeah, well, good. I'm glad that you read. How do you know it?
I was gonna say the same.
All right, a couple of things about T.S. Eliot. Are you familiar with, he wrote one of the great poems of the 20th century, The Wasteland. All right, he also wrote one called The Love Song of, I can't remember, but he was a very prolific writer, and he wrote plays as well as poetry. But he wrote a book of poems about cats called Opossum's Practical Book of Cats. And it was that book that inspired the 1980s, whenever the Broadway musical Cats came out. That play is based loosely on Eliot. Really more than loosely, because I've actually heard some of the songs, and they almost are word for word for the poetry of Eliot. So I wonder how he would think about it. He was a believer. That's another thing you know about him. Dr. Betzel, who you don't really know yet, Dr. Betzel did his dissertation PhD dissertation on T.S. Eliot. So he's somewhat of an expert on T.S. Eliot. So those are some things I know about him. I know he was an American, born in America, but he moved to England and he became a British citizen. That just doesn't happen much anymore. I don't know why he did that. But anyway, so that's about T.S. Eliot. The event is a real event, yeah.
Oh, you were saying that's his cousin.
All right, the event's a real event. There was a murder in the cathedral, and it sounds, as I said, it sounds like a detective. I wonder why he chose that. It sounds like he was the detective. Anyway, that's the cathedral. There's a real Canterbury cathedral. Any of you ever go to Canterbury School? And you know anybody that went
Oh,
there?
yeah. I haven't been there, but I know what it is.
Somebody told me, and I've seen it from a distance.
It looks like it.
It kind of resembles this. It's actually, I've seen it from a distance, like, it's up Church Street. I don't know if it's on, what road is it on? Anybody know? I've never literally driven by there.
It's like.
I drive past it every day, but I don't remember which.
Not Air Harbor Road.
I think Matthew,
Or,
I know there's Quaker Street, which is on the other side, that's a neighborhood, but.
and it does come out on Church Street, I believe. If you've ever ridden down, let's say Church Street, I don't know if that's what it was, you see this big building that comes like out of the, it's kind of neat. You know, I imagine that's the real Canterbury Cathedral does that. It is, I know it's not in London, it's outside of London, out in the countryside. So, that's Canterbury, and the story takes place, the entire story takes place at the cathedral. So if you will flip the page to the players.
Is that like the characters?
Yeah, but
Credits supplier.
because this is a play, it's, I guess they refer to it as players. But they're also real people. Everybody in the book is based on a real character. So this is a true story. And it's basically a story about the antagonism between the king, Henry II, and Thomas Becket, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury. It's basically a story about the conflict between church and state. Do any of you know what we mean when we talk about that? That if we had time, we would actually write a paper about that, because you know more about it than you realize. Yeah.
Well, in the early medieval times, I guess the kings and the papacy were in very close contact, you might say. Kings were believed to be ordained by God, and this is around the time where it's getting to the point where people are feeling that the kingship should be separate from the papacy.
Okay, very good. We usually think of, and of course, if you know, the papacy means the Pope, and the ruling authority in the church during the Middle Ages was the Pope. There was just one church. That's why it's called the Catholic Church, because Catholic means universal. If you're a Protestant and you do one of the creeds that says we believe in the Holy Catholic Church, Catholic means universal. Now, that's not the same thing as the Roman Catholic Church. That's what it's called now. But after the Protestant Reformation, you know, you had this split. So very good. I'll tell you some other ways that you feel it. We usually think of the separation of church and state as a bad thing. You know, we think that, and this could be true. I mean, right? I'm not sure. I certainly, you know how I feel about prayer. But a lot of people look back in the 1960s and said when prayer was taken out of the public schools, that was one of the worst things that happened. We live in a pluralistic culture. Not everybody's a Christian. So I guess I understand if you have a public school, you're going to have lots of people, and more, fewer people are Christians. So would it be fair to make non-Christians sort of pray, and listen to prayers. That's been the thinking for about 50, 70 years. But it also goes beyond that. If you've ever been in a public school, you know that you wouldn't be doing that. Let's say Kernodle. It's literally within walking distance of where we're sitting right now. But it's miles apart in so many other ways. We're a Christian school. We do not take public money. Therefore, the government stays out of our affairs. We can do that. We can pray. We can have Christmas decorations. We can say the word Christmas and Easter, and we can sing glory, glory to God in the highest, Soli Deo Gloria. You can't do that down there. I taught in a public school for 30 years. I remember here, just to me, this epitomizes what it was like. One year we had a new teacher. He happened to be an Air Force veteran, so he wasn't like 23 years, 22 out of college. But still, he was teaching lit, literally right there, and I'm right here. Well, there was this tree between A wing, which is what I was in, and G wing, which is where if you know anything about Page, the auditorium is over there. So there's this courtyard, sort of a courtyard. It's open on both ends, but it's kind of like this. There was a small pine tree right between the two buildings, and he decided to take his class out there and decorate it for Christmas. Well, we watched it. Well, now I could watch him because I was standing, I could see what it is, and I thought, well, let's see what happens there. An hour later, he was back, maybe his class, they were taking all the stuff off the tree because someone had called the principal and said, so-and-so is decorating a Christmas tree, you can't do that here. And he couldn't, so they had to take everything off. And that's just a little example of, and that was, I've been here 15 years, that was 20, 25 years ago. That's how, if that was going on then, you can imagine now. So we usually think of it as a bad thing, but on the other hand, look at us. We're able to call it Christmas and celebrate it and all this without anybody complaining because of the separation of church and state. If you're in a public school, and you're a Christian, I can understand why we can't even call it Christmas. We can't call it Easter. But you have the option of coming here or another Christian school. So maybe it's not such a bad thing. Maybe we shouldn't want other people to have to pray if they're not Christian. Now, what we would love is that we do have access to, the right to witness to people about Christ. If that's taken away, then we're going to probably have to say, okay, arrest me, because God tells us that we should be doing that. And if the state tells you you can't do it, what God tells you to do, then we have to make that decision. All right, put me in jail, because it's by the way, it's in the Constitution that gives us the freedom to practice our religion. So you see those issues. Anybody ever been in a public school? Well, you know what it's like. And you're here for some reason. Probably, maybe good reason, big reason rather, is that it's a Christian school. So anyway, I'd love to hear from you sometime about how your experience with that was. And it's probably frustrating to you. But anyway, that issue is what this book is about. Except it's in 1170, yeah.
I got when I was in like second grade, I remember the second piece, I got sent to the office for calling it Christmas break.
Really? You were in second grade?
Yeah.
Well, what did they do to you in the office?
They talked to me on how I was like not allowed to say that. So
Wow.
I didn't get like in trouble, but they just like talked to me, and they called my parents.
Really?
Yeah. My parents didn't care because like it's not bad, but
Now, what were the circumstances where you said that? What were you doing when you said, who heard you? And
I think I was talking, like, talking, she was talking about how we're almost gonna have a break, and I said, like, how long is Christmas break? And I don't know, they just got mad.
Second grade.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's something. That's really discouraging. that's freedom, that's a freedom of speech issue too. That, you're right to say something. It's not a bad word. In fact, I've had students say really, really bad words. They don't get sent to the front office. You might have a string of expletives and just sit right there quietly. If you say Christ or Christmas, you get sent to. That's the problem. The good thing is that we can come here, and there's certain rules that we don't take money from the government. They do, so it's a public school. The bad thing is that you would be punished for being a Christian. That's not, I don't think that's what that's designed for. If you were a Christian, you say the word, you have a right to say that, I think. You shouldn't be punished for being a Christian. All right. All those issues are here. Let me explain. So look at this sheet. If you have a highlighter, Henry II, you need to highlight his name. Henry II was married to Eleanor of Aquitaine. He was the King of England. He was the Duke of Normandy. He was also a Plantagenet. That was the family's name. And he was the first of a long line of Plantagenets in England. His son, Richard I, was the famous Richard the Lionhearted. His other son, John, was the infamous King of England, who was forced to sign the charter that required the church and the state, that the king was under he had certain constitutional limits. What's the name of the charter that Dave? What's the name of the charter? the King of England signed gosh, I can't believe I can't remember.
Vassal.
It's the name of this charter. It's the name of this thing. Goodness. Anyway, think about it. I'll try to.
Well, I know something that is completely wrong. The
What?
Geneva Convention.
Well, this was in 1170, and anyway, it'll come to me. But anyway, that's Henry II. 3 things about him. Highlight this. He owned a lot of land. First thing. Second thing, he established a royal court. That's like the civil court, downtown Greensboro, the criminal court. That's a state-run court. He wanted to centralize government. He wanted to be right at this point. There was this kind of dual court system, because thirdly, he wanted the royal courts to have jurisdiction over the church courts. So the churches had courts. Now, I don't think you would like that. Here's some example. What if you didn't pay your tithe? You promised to pay whatever, 10%, and you didn't do it. They could take you to court. It's like not paying your taxes. You can get in trouble for that. If you were guilty of some moral crime, they could take you to court. The interesting thing in our culture, adultery is not illegal. It may be, somewhere on the books you can find adultery is still illegal, but you can't be charged with a crime. You can be charged with a crime for riding 55 in a 45, or even 1 mile per hour over there. I don't think they're doing a lot with traffic right now with speeding. But you see, the church courts took care of those issues. Yeah.
I think the legal scuffle and like divorces and things is punishment enough, honestly.
You mean the fact that you have to go through the divorce courts? Yeah, that's true. If you're legally married, to get the benefits of marriage, you have to do it in front of you have to have a legal license. If to get unmarried, which is divorce, you have to go to court, and it's a big thing because it involves taxes and who owns the house, and so that's a good point. There's some punishment involved in it. Anyway, that's Henry II. He wanted centralized government. He wanted the courts to be more powerful than the church court, and he owned a lot of land. Turn the page. The other main character is named Thomas Becket. Thomas Becket was a good friend of Henry, and I think Thomas Becket made this statement. He said, our friendship will turn to hate. Because he and Henry were really good friends, and they became really big enemies. In fact, Henry is probably the man who ordered his assassination. All right, so what do we know about Thomas Becket? He was born in Cheapside. What does that sound like? What kind of place do you think
Poor.
Cheapside?
Oh my God.
He didn't even say Christmas. That's Magic Radio. You know, they do play the Christmas music. Unless he said a holiday.
This holiday season.
Well, it is. You know, Hanukkah, we have that. And
But even holiday is, I think, a contraction of holy day.
Holy Day, you're right. All right, so he was born in Cheapside. And guys, I prefer that you take notes, but we couldn't do that. I couldn't have access to this, so you need to pay attention. Highlight these things. Get a highlighter, underline. He was a lawyer, so he studied church law, and he became Archdeacon of Canterbury in 1154. That's important because Archdeacon was the man who ran the business affairs of the church. He wasn't the spiritual head of the church, he was the business head of the church. And he was so good at it that the King of England, Henry II, made him the Chancellor of England in 1155. The Chancellor was the business head of the state. The king was the overall head of the state. So he was so good at business, Henry, that they made him business leader of the country, running the church. Running the government affairs, business affairs. One of the things he did as chancellor, he taxed the church in order for Henry to be able to fight his wars. Now, prior to this, how did a king get money to pay his troops?
From the tax.
People.
He had to conquer, he got money, he paid his men, he ran out of money, he had to conquer again, get money to pay his men, ran out of money. You know, it's that vicious cycle. Well,
It's like a tax.
so now it's become a tax, which is more humane and fair, right? If you live in America, you gotta pay taxes because they give you the water, they give you roads, you know, there are things they protect you, the police and the military. So, you know, people don't mind being taxed if they realize their money's being used wisely. There's nothing wrong with being taxed. It's more fair than just taking it, right? I don't have any money, let me attack those people and take their money, and then I'll give it to my people. So I think that's an improvement. All right, so he was so good at being chancellor, Henry II appointed him as Archbishop of Canterbury. Archbishop is the spiritual head of the church in England. Now the Pope is still head of the church worldwide, but Henry, or Thomas rather, became the head of the church in England. Now and he's a big friend of Henry, so why do you think Henry wanted his buddy to be head of the church?
So you could tell him what to do.
Yeah.
Right, because Henry wants to control everything in England, including the church. And up to this point, the church was free to do its own thing. But with his guy in charge, now he's got things under control. It didn't work out that way. So if you'll turn the page. What happened was, when Thomas was appointed as archbishop, he took his job very seriously, and he began to defend the church from the state. Remember, as chancellor, he actually taxed the church. Now, he refuses to pay taxes. Now that he's in the other side of the role, he's now protecting the church. And he changed his lifestyle too. Early in Merton Cathedral, it talks about these big parties that Thomas would give as chancellor. He would give these elaborate parties. But he loved to party, he loved to have a good time. When he became archbishop of the church, he didn't do that anymore. Of course, he wasn't in that role anymore, but he didn't do it. He refused to be both chancellor and archbishop. So now he became a very serious leader of the church, and particularly was concerned about the rights of poor people, the common people of England. There's a character in the play called the Pooress, and actually represents the women of Canterbury, the poor women of Canterbury. There's nothing more pitiful in these cultures in the Middle Ages than being poor and being a woman, because women didn't have very many rights at all. And so they were among the most vulnerable people, and Henry, or that is Thomas, I keep saying Henry, Thomas wanted to protect them. And so he even opposed the taxes. As I said, he wouldn't pay his taxes. And this made Henry really angry. And he also refused to let the royal courts interfere with the church courts. And Henry thought the church courts were too easy. You know, they weren't. You ever read any Dickens? Charles Dickens? Probably a Christmas Carol. Ever anything else?
Oh, yeah. Wait, you're talking about the
I saw the Christmas Carol movie.
Have you ever read anything besides the Christmas Carol? What have you read?
Oliver Twist, is that?
Yeah.
Oh,
One thing that Charles Dickens, including the Christmas Carol, does is he talks about how badly poor people were treated. Now, we're talking about the 1800s. This is about 400 years later, 700 years later. So you can imagine in 1170 how poor people were treated. In the 1800s, they're mistreated. And so that's who Thomas is concerned about, is the poor people. It got so bad between Henry and Thomas that Thomas left England to go to France. And the only reason I can think he would do that is because they were going to kill him. He felt like his life was in danger. So he left for 7 years, 6, 7 years. They say 7 years, but he comes back 1170. That seems like it's 6 years to me. So he goes to France for about 7 years and flips the page. Again, what you can be doing, since you're not taking notes, you can be highlighting, you can be underlining. You're going to need to know this material. All right, so that's where the story began. The book, Murder Cathedral, begins with Thomas coming back from France and his exile, his self-imposed exile, and coming back to England. Now, a man that had to leave because he was worried about his life, what do you think the dangers are now for him having come back?
oh, he would not be like,
So he would be even more concerned, since he kind of ran away, now that he's back, that they're going to kill him. And that's eventually what happens. They do kill him.
and this is Thomas?
Thomas. So in 1170, he comes back after about 7 years of exile. Remember, he went there on his own. He wasn't sent or forced to go, except the fact that if he hadn't gone, he might have died. All right, but when he comes back, the second part, he finds out that some of the bishops who he is supervising had made friends with the king while he was gone. So he, remember, Thomas was opposed to the king. He's gone 7 years. When he comes back, some of the bishops had become friends with the king. And so he asks the Pope to excommunicate these bishops, which he does. The Pope excommunicates. You know what that is?
Probably feel like not talk to him.
To remove from the hierarchy.
And particularly the church. So if you're excommunicated in the church in those days, that means that you don't have access to any of the sacraments, which is your way to get to heaven. You're essentially barred from going to heaven if you're excommunicated. Because it's like your status as a believer has been taken away. Now, as a Protestant, we can't understand that, because you're not saved by sacraments. You're saved by Christ himself, and you have a relationship with him that nobody can ever change. They can try, but if you're saved, you know, you're in God's hands. But in those days, if you had communicated, you basically were barred from going to heaven, as if people could do that, but that was the thing. Henry got so angry at what Thomas did and what the Pope did that he made this comment, that apparently is a historical fact: will no one rid me of this turbulent priest? It was a question. See, I got this, gotta keep it up.
Oh, sorry.
You got this priest who's causing trouble, and he can't do anything about it. He's like, he says one day, is there anybody that can get rid of this priest for me? Well, there are 4 guys who heard him. And they went to Canterbury and they killed Thomas. On December 29, 1170.
And like that, they were hired by Henry?
Well, he denied it. I didn't hire him. I didn't tell him to do it. But you said this. I didn't tell them to do it. I was just thinking out loud. And they decided on their own to do it. That was his argument. So if you'll flip the page one more time. Even though he claims he didn't order them, he does penance. What's penance?
And like, forgiveness or like serves or punishment?
It's if you commit a sin, you need to pay back the sin. And so we call that, the church called that penance. Like you steal $50, we would call that restitution. You give the $50 back, maybe you serve some time and then you're free. But the church would make you do something. They would make you go serve in a soup kitchen for a year to make up for the sin you committed. So Henry imposes penance on himself. Thomas is dead, but he's made a saint. The knights who killed him were sent to the Holy Land on pilgrimage as penance, and they never come back. No one knows whatever happened to them. They either were killed, they died some other way, or they just stayed there because they were never heard from again. And then Canterbury Cathedral becomes a place of pilgrimage. We're going to read a book called The Canterbury Tales. And it's a story about a group of people that are going to Canterbury to pay homage to Thomas Becket. Thomas Becket never appears in the Canterbury Tales. They never get to Canterbury. It really has very little to do with this story or with the cathedral. It is an excuse for these people to go on a pilgrimage, and during the pilgrimage they tell stories, hence the Canterbury Stories or Canterbury Tales. That's by Chaucer. It's one of the great books written. We're going to read portions of it in February. But I just want you to know that people would go to Canterbury in order to pay respect to him, to Thomas Becket. So that's the background. You have homework due the 3rd of December, vocabulary. Starting Monday and Tuesday, we'll read the play, and maybe we'll get a test in, maybe we'll finish it, we'll just have to see. Also, next Monday, you'll get a review sheet for your exam. So have a great Thanksgiving, but don't forget, there is an exam coming up.